Tickets.com. Sandbag Lotto opposite the Oval. Northern Hardware, Digger Martin Main Road. West Star Liquor Mart, Moncoco Road. Top Office, Belmont. Hearty Foods Arima. Charlie's Anchor Cafe. Corner Anna Street and Aripita Avenue. Frankie's on the Avenue. Quasi Discount Mart, California. Universal Plumbing, Digger Martin Main Road. Woodview, Tragrit Road. GAK Electrical and Plumbing. Opposite Starlight. Western Union, Tunapuna. VML Minimart, St. Lucian Road. Arthur's Minimart, Balandra. Alum's Pharmacy, Majuma Crossroad. Madison Bag, Digger Martin. Auto and Lotto Shop, Long Circular Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College, Christmas 3-car raffle.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
¿Qué camino cogería si cogióle la desgracia? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? Una mujer me llamaba, pero yo no le entendí.
WESN.
It's a pleasant morning we're having. Just I wish it wasn't quite as wet, but I always appreciate the shade. One thing we have to question, we have to wonder, because I believe last year around this time we went into December, we faced the beginning of December, where for months we were hearing about our reservoirs being low and what have you. And then by the end of December, it's like, well, we got so much rain, that wasn't an issue anymore. That amount of rain, though, brings with it concerns about potential flooding. So this is just one of those things, but we'll see. It's not as though, you know, it's anything untoward. I just had that thought this morning. What kind of December will we have? Will we see a lot of rain? Will we not? We can't have a white Christmas, but we can sure have a gray one. Now, with that said, a couple of things to get through this at the start of the show. I don't necessarily want to make this a big thing, although I know there are going to be a lot of people that disagree with me, but it is what it is. The whole situation with the banning of FETs at the UDCOT facilities, one of the things that I disagreed with was the heavy-handedness of the approach, but also the abruptness. Now, maybe I didn't necessarily state that clearly, but I do believe when speaking with Ashraf, I did mention you could have maybe done it for next year as opposed to for this carnival season, because it was kind of close. Now, things have taken a turn, whereas FET promoters and representatives of South Trinidad cultural institutions, that's how it's being reported. I'm not saying that they are representatives. I'm saying it was reported they are representatives of cultural institutions. Apparently, they have warned the government they may seek legal remedies after what is reported as, so I'm not editorializing this, abrupt bans on key event venues jeopardize preparation for Carnival 2026. Now, most people say, I don't care about FET promoters, particularly if you have noise pollution issues that have gone unaddressed for a long time. One of the FETs that is part of this whole brouhaha, which is escalating things from just in the court of public opinion to potentially to the courts, is, let me just get, I believe someone representing Naparima College. Damian Babula, representing the Naparima College Association of Past Students and South Trinidad event producers, said the ban on the Brian Lara Cricket Academy site has completely disenfranchised the people of South Trinidad from hosting large-scale cultural events, right? It brought opportunities we never had before, and it allowed residents to access cultural events without traveling to Port of Spain. Now, I get it. A lot of people, the use of the word culture, right? I just want to point out, I didn't use it. What do you make of as Carnival Fets as cultural? On some level, I get it. You might think it's not really cultural, it's commercial. But unfortunately, I believe on the strict definition of the term, it is cultural. The abrupt, out-of-the-blue position taken by the Prime Minister has deprived my school, Naparima College, my alumni, of its signature fundraising event for the first year. Or I believe this is now the first time something like this has happened since the Cricket Academy has been available. We are still without a venue to this day. It could have been that they had an alternate venue in the past and that the event grew to match the availability of the Cricket Academy, right? And maybe that's, so it could have been the first year ever for the history of the event, not necessarily just Cricket Academy. We are still without a venue to this day, and this event is not a luxury. It is the single largest source of funding for the school. It is the single largest source of funding for the school. So I'm not saying that the people with noise pollution concerns are wrong for wanting their needs addressed. What I will say is, if it goes to court, and depending on the amount of public support, because here we have an Old Boys Association basically saying, hey, this is going to potentially harm financially our alma mater. And we're not just talking about some halfway broken down school for 10 people. We're talking about a major school, a prestige school, for better or worse. But regardless of its prestige status, what is undoubtedly a significantly sized school. Now, at what point is the public going to just look at that and take the shortcut to this whole ban thing is nonsense? Look at what they're doing. Just by the way, let me not go there. The fact of the matter is, depending on how it's framed, how the court of public opinion continues, and if this goes to trial, and if the government loses, Ashraf's whole point was he welcomed the dialogue. My whole point was I welcome the dialogue too, but I want dialogue for actual solutions, not temporary band-aid problems that may or may not actually have a follow-up. If there's no follow-up, then this is not as useful as, I think it's not as useful as most people think it is, if there's no follow-up, because there's so much more noise pollution than just at a couple of venues. But if it goes to court and potentially loses, which it might on the basis that it was abrupt. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly how the law will view it. It depends on the arguments made by the FET promoters. It depends on the potential to say, these are the expected losses of revenue. These are the expected losses incurred because we already invested money in preparation for the events. It was so abrupt, we incurred financial losses already. And depending on what law they're applying to, they're asking relief under, and how they frame all of that, the government could lose. And then you take two and two together, depending on the courts of public opinion, because again, this is not Carnival band losing money. And let's not forget, there's so many employees and secondary employment from Carnival Fets. Those people might not like what the Prime Minister is doing, but it is what it is, right? That's private business. Naparima College is not quite private business. And to what extent might there be other stories like that in the narrative? So you put two and two together, and then it could basically encourage the politicians to abandon this whole thing. That's the outcome that I least want to see happen. I don't actually want to see that happen, right? I do believe that there needs to be better accountability for FET promoters, but the problem is, depending on how the situation unfolds, the pendulum might swing too, because I believe that the Prime Minister is being too heavy-handed in this specific instance. And essentially, that's the pendulum swinging the other way, but going too far. And what tends to happen is it will swing back. And it will swing back, if it does, too far. It won't swing back in moderation. If you try to deal with noise pollution too heavy-handedly, it could backfire, and then the fallout could cause more noise pollution when that pendulum goes back the other way too far. That's the kind of things that I don't want to see happen, and I was concerned about from the jump, but no one necessarily wanted to debate me on that. They just wanted to debate me on, no, well, we're suffering and we need relief. I get it. But if you get relief that is not sustainable, because unfortunately, our starting point is a too tolerant or too turning a blind eye society. We do it too much. We allow too much when it comes to noise, right? In part because systemically, there's very limited avenues to successfully complain and get those complaints properly addressed in our society. I get that. But unfortunately, it's a bad starting point. It's a bad starting point. It's an uphill battle, and a heavy-handed approach is not going to do the most important thing needed to turn the situation around, and that is to get the majority of the public, not just the people that have noise complaints, but the majority of the public, not just to be concerned about it, not just to empathize with you, but also actively want to change it alongside you and actively want to encourage and or demand proper accountability on this, which I don't necessarily think is happening anytime soon, because right now the bulk of the population doesn't care about this until they find out the fets that they wanted to go to were cancelled, and then they actually may be the basis for a backlash. And then what that means is the FET promoters, they just have to weather the storm, and then they could go on as business as usual, and there will probably be not, because none of the public servants, the AMA and the TTPS, depending on how this, if this ends badly, they'll be less incentivized to take on noise complaints, particularly from major events. But also, other things could slip through tracks as well. I don't want to get further into this. I just think on some level, when I say it's part of the culture, it's not meant as a positive. It's meant that you're not going to get an easy solution that's going to solve your problems now. You need to look at long-term solutions to shift the culture. And you have to figure out ways to get people to care about you. Because at the end of the day, it's not that they don't care about you, they just don't have time to care about much of anything else beyond their own considerations. That's why the majority of our best and brightest ain't in politics. Politicians are not our best and brightest. Politicians are our most ambitious, who probably also have some of the least professional prospects in comparison to their academic achievement, or alleged. All right, one thing I wanted to talk about this week, I don't understand, I don't get it. So, and maybe, now I don't know if you could buy cryptocurrency physically, but a 52-year-old man attempted to do so. $85,800 cash, he went to buy crypto coins. Now crypto is digital currency. So in my mind, there's no physical thing to give you. Now I was told, and this is the stuff that you see online and stuff, maybe it's on a hard drive or something like that. I don't know if I will be comfortable buying that much amount of a digital asset locally, particularly via cash. Now, I don't know exactly what's the best way to do such a transaction safely. My online transactions are basically, I need to know that this is a large company with a large customer base with a long track record of not being a scam, for me to be even willing to consider doing anything online. And then, of course, it's all of the make sure you don't have a fake fraudulent site that is a fake version of the company site, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So you limit yourself to certain industry norms, avenues by which you would engage in online transactions, right? $85,800 in the car park of a pharmacy. Now, here's the best part. It seems as though, I'm not entirely too sure if the supposed seller was in on it or if he was a victim too, I don't know. They could have been just tracking the cash. The men snatched the money, cell phones before escaping in a waiting car after knocking on the windows. They ambushed the gentleman with the cash and potentially the supposed seller. I don't know if that's just an alibi thing or what. It comes back down to a very basic, simple point. Do not go around with cash. Do not buy things of that scale in cash. There are means that you could do this transaction through the bank, whether electronically or with some kind of check or some kind of payment option. Anything but cash. This is 2025. There are multiple stories of robberies because people had ridiculously large amounts of cash, and by ridiculous I mean anything past a couple $1,000s. Listen, they'll rob you for $800. They don't care. But the more money you have, and then I don't know if there are some people, they don't know how to not look as though they're walking around with a big pile of money with a very obvious arrow pointing down at them saying, rob me now. Like, that's why you don't do it. I get it, you don't trust the banks, but you could at least go into the bank, go to the customer information desk or customer service desk, speak to somebody, just shop around your options. Go to one bank, go to another bank, call your nephew, call your cousin, call your brother, call your sister. Don't just take it upon yourself to have almost $100,000 because I need to buy something and I only doing it in cash because I only use cash. That's fine if you're buying fast food. That's fine if you're buying Chinese food. That's fine if you're going to buy a jeans in the mall. That's not fine if you're looking to spend somewhere along the lines of tens of thousands of dollars. The police keep warning people about it. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say because even if the police doesn't warn you anything, one would think just the news stories of all the robberies, if anyone is at least partially aware of the news in the country, they would figure out for themselves, maybe walking around with large amounts of cash is a bad idea. Unless you're up to no good, by the way. Traditionally, walking around with that much cash is not a good sign. But hey, there are a lot of people who don't trust electronic banking in this country, so I can't necessarily say that it's for criminal proceedings. But in certain countries, they have shifted so much to not utilizing cash that is a red flag. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. And then through that lens, we have to ask with these stories, how many of these stories then were red flags? The High Court has basically said the TTPS Promotion Advisory Board breached the law. Essentially, there was somebody on the board who was not properly or was not authorized to be on the board. That's the long and short of it, right? The inclusion of a certain individual to the advisory board was not eligible to serve that individual as the Ministry of National Security's representative on the board. Therefore, the judge prohibited the commissioner from relying on the order of merit list issued in 2020 and 2021, which were generated by that improperly constituted board. This is because someone brought a lawsuit with regards to promotions. On some level, I have to admit, it seems as though in the individual case, it's a technicality. Because the person has served on the board before, apparently, and I don't believe the credentials of the individual has come into question. Just the fact that her inclusion on the board was improper. Improper to the point where the judge basically has to say, he had to throw it out. The judge ruled that the Promotion Advisory Board's composition breached statutory requirements and that the declaration sought would assist in ensuring compliance and preventing future irregularities. Because at the end of the day, it might just be a technicality, but you know, the state kind of opens itself up to all kind of lawsuits depending on if there's any more fallout with TTPS promotions, which there usually are. And then of course now, it doesn't have to be for improper motives, right? But if you breach procedure, if you breach statutory requirements, someone's going to say why. And then someone is going to speculate because there was some corruption there. And that's just how it goes. There's a reason why we have a thing. You can't just break it on a whim. You can't just break it on willy-nilly. You can't just break it because you think that we need this person no matter what and it's fine. You can't, because now you open yourself up to speculation on greater impropriety. Not just a procedural one, not just a breach in statutory regulations. Anyone that looks at this closely, I would hazard a guess that trust and confidence in the police took a hit over this story, just by the way. Which then now takes another situation that I wanted to speak about. If I have any details wrong, feel free to call in later and you could tell me. But it goes to another situation where the commissioner is basically saying, hey, the authority to grant firearms should remain with the Commissioner of Police. Any attempt to change this could create chaos, inefficiencies, and added bureaucracy. Except, I'm sorry, the police service can't even handle promotion of its own officers, its own promotional advancements of its own officers without, think about the sheer number of lawsuits and controversial stories just on TTPS promotions alone. Why then an organization that can't handle its own internal administration, am I supposed to be confident that they can handle something far more serious like the assessment and granting of FULs? Why? Is it not the same TTPS personnel? Granted, not the actual same people, potentially, hopefully, maybe, but the same organization, personnel from the same organization, who will be doing a lot of the groundwork under which they will be operating under the Commissioner of Police, by which that information will be used as the assessment on whether or not someone is granted an FUL or not. Why? And then there is the other side to the equation where, why is it that other state entities has to go through the Commissioner of Police? That potentially is breeding ground for inter-service rivalry worsening. Why does the Defense Force have to go to the police with regards to their firearm procurement? Why does the police as a service have authority over all other services with regards to something like that? Someone please tell me. Now, I could see a situation where you have a board and the Commissioner of Police is on the board, or a member of the TTPS, a senior member of the TTPS is on the board. But I don't know why exactly the Commissioner outlined long-standing infrastructural and operational challenges affecting the licensing process, as well as the sensitive human realities that must be considered. That's nice. Why is it then that the pre-existing arrangement is so critical to ensure that none of those inefficiencies happen, or to prevent the inefficiencies, or to try to solve the issues? The current framework was established to ensure accountability, transparency, and public safety, with the Commissioner and the police as vanguards. That's nice. No offense, but the difference between EARLA and the current Commissioner is individual, it's personal. It has nothing to do with the system. So the previous commissioner basically showed, oh, the system could be exploited. We could just blank people for FULs. And based on the allegations of the previous administration, you can have a commissioner that's selling FULs. So please tell me exactly how is the system promoting accountability, transparency, and public safety? Because it's not as though the current commissioner has been able to shut down any of the allegations that were thrown out there with regards to former Commissioner Griffith. Something that on some level, if he could do it, he probably should, because that again goes back to the whole trust and confidence thing. Yes, I get it, that's his predecessor. But if the system allows for such things to happen, regardless of who is to blame or who's responsible and who did what, then people will look at this whole situation and say, hey, how do we know you're not doing that? How do we know you're not selling licenses? The accountability is to who? Because on some level, the public is not supposed to know the details about the granting of FULs or not. That's sensitive information. So where exactly is the check and balance? Who watches the watchers on this situation? The police service cannot handle its own internal administrative responsibilities for the benefits of its own membership, for the benefits of its own progression of skills and career advancements of its own members, not without controversy. Why do we feel that they will handle the FUL situation? And I'm not saying that the current commissioner is not, he could be doing everything right. But unfortunately, we can't see it. We can't see it. He can't show us. And the situation is what it is for the longest while. But it's too much to suggest that the police, why should we put our faith in an institution that's reliant on state of emergencies to keep the main rate down? And it's an unfair statement to make, but basically, you need to get some real good evidence to basically say the state emergencies were not a major component of the main rates going down. Particularly since the main rates started going down before the current commissioner was appointed. So you can't tell me, oh, well, it is the current commissioner's strategies and blah, 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 that caused the main rate to go down. No, it was down before. It was down before an acting commissioner during the previous administration. It went down before. And it stayed down during the election. Now, the election could have played a part, Carnival could have played a part, I get that. The point of the matter is, we cannot definitively say the TTPS, through their work and their work only, and the work of the Ministry of National Security and whatever other supporting services, are 100% responsible for the main rate going down. We already have issues with regards to the capabilities, the professionalism, etc., of certain members of the TTPS. Now you're making claims about how we are the absolute truth, the way, the light on this matter. Why should we believe that? Because there's nothing to back that up, that the institution as a whole, can be viewed in that light. We could view individuals in that light. We could say, as I've said before, that there are a lot of police officers out there doing their best to keep the system from falling apart. But then you could also point to published public interactions, whether recordings, audio recordings, or video recordings, of petty behavior by police officers. Petty behavior, in some cases, by senior police officers. And then there's the fact that nobody wants to say who authorized the Brent Thomas excursion. At the very least, this is how straightforward the investigation into that matter should be. The lead officer, you know where she is. You have access to her. You could ask her questions. If she fails to answer them, she could be disciplined if necessary, given the severity of the situation, because essentially, she was instructed to kidnap somebody. Unless I have it wrong and she wasn't the officer in charge. So, on some level, given the fact that the previous administration is not there, who's running cover to cover up that. And I have to ask, how is it that the investigation can't even question the lead officer? And it's very simple. If she fails to answer, you ask her why. And the more she tries to not answer, the more you have to ask her why, and the situation becomes suspicious. And what, you just leave that alone? There's nothing wrong with that? Because the assumption is someone had to authorize her to go. Someone had to get the plate. She doesn't know. She got anonymous orders. I've heard about anonymous sources. I never heard about anonymous orders. Did the then commissioner at the time give her the orders? Was the means to communicate the orders? Well, then you go up the line. I'm not saying that you're going to get all the answers. I'm just saying you can't tell me that, oh, well, we don't know what direction to take the investigation. I have heard nothing of this. This should not take that long. All the documentation should be there. If there's document missing, that's a red flag. If the officers involved either don't want to give details on what happened or can't, that is also a red flag. This is not an office job situation where, well, you know, we don't know who stole your coffee, so we can't really do nothing about it. This is the TPPS. If you can't conduct an investigation, how am I supposed to have faith like this? How am I supposed to have faith in any investigation? But, you know, it's safest to keep FULs the sole responsibility, not just for the public, but also for the Defense Force, the Army, the Coast Guard, etc. It's best to keep it under the police. That's what you're trying to sell me. You don't have the cachet as an institution. Not the commissioner. I'm not talking about the commissioner. The institution you run doesn't have the cachet for you to make those statements. It just doesn't. And if you want to keep making statements like that, it's going to cause the people to start to question what exactly is the agenda. Do you understand the position that the TTPS is in? It's a perception deficit. Your appointment has helped somewhat. It doesn't erase all sins. The good work of the police helps somewhat. It doesn't erase all sins. I don't understand people with heavy-handed approaches. All right, I've gone on too long. Let's take a break. When we come back, I'll continue on this topic. I have been saying it, but now apparently it's an issue for politicians. Whoop-de-doo, right? I'm glad that they decided to join the party, but I don't know, it might come across as hypocritical to some people, but it's still something that we do need to talk about when we come back after this. Stay tuned.
Three-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. First prize is a Royal Ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Sandbag Lotto opposite the Oval. Northern Hardware, Diggle Martin Main Road. Westal Liquor Mart, Moncoco Road. Top Office, Belmont, Hearty Foods Arima. Charlie's Anchor Cafe, Corner Anna Street and Aripita Avenue. Frankie's on the Avenue. Quasi Discount Mart, California. Universal Plumbing, Diggle Martin Main Road. Woodview, Tragrit Road. GAK Electrical and Plumbing, opposite Starlight. Western Union, Tunapuna. VML Minimart, St. Lucian Road. Authors Minimart, Balantra. Alums Pharmacy, Majuma Crossroad. Madison Bog, Diggle Martin. Auto and Lotto Shop, Long Circular Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College, Christmas three-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics. Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town!
Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him! I know him!
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Now, research isn't conclusive on if negative politics is the most effective way to get votes. But it is, I believe, a proven way to get attention. The news tends to run with negative stories more than positive ones, right? They're more controversial. They engender a larger, more widespread emotional response. They tend to go more viral, etc., etc. Not always, not always. But one of the things that I have said ever since before the attack on the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons, which was, I believe it potentially might have been as much as 2 years ago, either 2023 or maybe even 2022. That same day, they got a cache of firearms, which alarmed me because it suggested capabilities that, for me, was not confirmed until that day. Capabilities of how they could attack government officials and the security of said officials potentially effectively. Potentially, right? Capabilities that then makes any sort of public appearance a lot more risky, which is why I didn't necessarily want to say that having security concerns over national events was something that was completely unfounded. But even before that day, which was a couple years ago at least, I believe, I brought up the point that the rhetoric in the country, where you basically vilify and demonize the other side, you don't debate them based on the merits of policy. You don't debate them fully on the merits of the complete track record, because you conveniently only point to the failures and you don't necessarily account for the successes, right? You have nothing. It's a very, very schoolyard level of debate. And you vilify the evil, the wicked, the vile. Given the level of violence that we had at that time, I asked the question, and I was trying not to spell it out, not to make it too direct and obvious. But I basically was asking, like, is anyone else not seeing how easy it would be for one person to go off his rockers and do something stupid? And something stupid is not they get themselves shot. Something stupid is they actually attack and succeed. And it doesn't matter who they attack and who they hit or kill. It could be a PNM, a UNC, a TPP, an NTA, a PEP, a Patriotic Front. It doesn't matter who. It could be a union leader. It could be a religious leader. The point is, once that genie is let out of the bottle, you know what human behavior is like. Once it's let out of the bottle, monkey see, monkey do. All of a sudden, there will be a cross-section of people who buy into the rhetoric, who buy into the fact that the other side are demons, they're evil, they are going to ruin your life, so you need to stop them. You need to stop them. And somebody's going to get to their head, well, I know how to stop them. Whether it is that they're desperate to stop them, whether it is that they have a sense of self-importance and they want to show the rest of the world, hey, y'all are too weak, I know the way, this is the way. Whether it is just someone getting a crazy conclusion in the air. You never know who might be devoid of normal human emotion and responses and not really see the issue. Well, you know, they said he was bad, so I shot him. Now the opposition has brought this up because, of course, unless you have been ignoring the news completely over the last couple of weeks, Senator Dr. Amy Brown, he received a death threat. Now, in his case, the threat was one of the more obscene threats that I've ever seen against any public figure, because the threat was against him and his children. And I'm like, whoa, what are you on to make that threat now? What has this man done that you don't just hate him to the point where you want to threaten his life, but you want to threaten the lives of his kids? Now, this is what Senator Dr. Amy Brown said. You're dealing with a broad population. You're dealing with supporters, some of which might be susceptible to taking the wrong decisions and actions based on your rhetoric. He's reported to have saying that all political actors need to be prudent in their language and the example they set for their supporters. That's key. We'll come back to that in a bit. He's quoted to go on to say, so I wish that part there that I just said, he was reported to have said those things, but it wasn't a quote. Maybe he kind of said it in broken up pieces throughout an entire session, right? But he has went on to have quoted to said, and the Prime Minister has been negligent in that regard, and from some of her output has been, in my view, feeding this polarization within the society. Now, I'm not entirely sure to what extent I will agree with that, but I will say that some of her language is somewhat gung-ho. But I'm fairly certain, at the very least, she is nowhere near the biggest offender, right? There were recent lies being perpetrated that everyone has an arsenal of weapons. That is also not true. But when you put this mischief out there, it really affects the public perception and risks and safety balance in the eyes of the public. Now, one of the things that he pointed to was the fact that the person that threatened him, this is another publication right after those unfortunate words by the Prime Minister. This is Dr. Amy Brown, quoted of saying this. Both myself and my family received direct threats from one of the UNC's fanatical supporters. Now, apparently, it's a 48-year-old man from Diego Martin. Now, he might be a UNC fanatical supporter. The geographic location suggests otherwise. It's not impossible. It does suggest otherwise. Regardless of where he's from, to make the claim that he's a UNC fanatical supporter You see, he could just be a Amy Brown, Dr. Amy Brown hater, PNM hater. Doesn't have to be a UNC supporter to fall into that mindset, right? But anyway, to make the claim that he's a UNC fanatical supporter, on some level, we need evidence for that. The main reason why is, and we come back to that line, all political actors need to be prudent in their language and the example they set for their supporters. Because here we have a man that made a heinous death threat against you. And you basically, depending, now maybe he has evidence, maybe the man was wearing UNC shirts, maybe it is known for a fact he said for months that he voted for the UNC, or he voted for the UNC's coalition in the Digger Martin area, right? Whatever constituency it is. But if it's just a comment off the cuff, oh, well, obviously he's a UNC fanatical supporter because he hates me and he wants to take my life, or even if it's a throwaway threat, you know, even if it's just a throwaway comment, he has to be a UNC fanatical supporter to make that comment. No one else is going to make such a comment. And what that does is, now, everybody else is going to look at that, read that, and on some level, to varying degrees, depending on your perception of the situation, depending on your capacity to exercise good judgment and your willingness to exercise good judgment and the actual exercise of judgment that you undertake in this situation. Because you could have all the good judgment in the world and still be quick to make assumptions, right? Some people might see this as an escalation. Oh, you see what UNC doing? Some people might attribute this behavior to the UNC. And then all of a sudden now the us against them is no longer just stuff we say on the internet, stuff we say in political rallies, stuff we say in rum shops, stuff we say to each other on the street. Now it will escalate at the minimum to who is going to threaten who, who is going to try to intimidate who is going to vilify who, but with a different purpose now. MP Commonwealth brought up the situation where the Prime Minister said she'll cuff him down. Now here's the thing. No one believes that Commonwealth was at risk of being physically beaten by the Prime Minister, right? Fairly said. I know he's old, but she is also old, and I know he's small, but she is smaller than him. I believe she is. So that's not a real threat. He's technically, on principle, not wrong, though, to say you can't be saying these things. And I get it. There'll be a lot of people who probably want to say those things to Commonwealth, but that is besides the point. You can't be saying these things because somebody's going to hear it. For every 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people to understand it's rhetorical, it's a joke, it's not meant to be taken seriously, there's going to be one. All it takes is one to be like, yeah, somebody should cuff him down. And we're not talking about some Johnny-come-lately PNM or UNC or some third-party person who the public barely knows, who doesn't have much of a reputation, and no one dislikes. A long-established politician, you say you're going to cuff them down. Yeah, it's a joke to you. Yeah, it's a joke to you. Well, let me not say that. All it takes is one person to be like, yeah, I should cuff him down. That is also Pandora's box, by the way. Politicians walk through normal everyday life at least part of the time. They don't all have security details. There was that whole clip of Minister Padrad buying fast food while there's threats against the lives of senior government officials. I've seen Carmen Burt, then Minister Imbert, in public. I don't know if he had a policeman security details shadowing him, but he seemed to be unprotected. And I was concerned because I'm like, all it takes is one person to hate you enough to physically assault you. That's a Pandora's box. Then all of a sudden, hey, politicians have to have security. Can't go anywhere public without a whole convoy. The entire lives of our society will be disrupted then whenever they go anywhere, which is the other issue, right? I mean, you get annoyed with the Prime Minister's convoy. Now imagine if every minister, wherever they went, had to have 2 security guards with them, 2 police officers that had to be shoving you out the way and all kind of nonsense. Part of the rhetoric also has been I do believe there was also a report with regards to some of the accusations that the Prime Minister made. Let me just double check this here. Okay, I won't go into that. I won't go into that. Now, I think we kind of take it for granted that, well, no, let me go to the next example. The Chief Secretary had a very interesting political message to make. Chief Secretary Fale Gaston said, next month's Tobago election is a fight to keep the island out of the hands of Satan and his children. Quote, this is not just an election we want because we want to win. We need to keep Tobago out of the hands of Satan and his children. Throughout his speech, it is reported that the Chief Sec said Tobago had suffered greatly under previous administrations and that the island could not risk going back. But I do believe, though, that he didn't necessarily say, or he didn't, I want to make sure that I get this right. He told the crowd, although this is the report, not referring to anyone specifically, when he made the statement to keep Tobago out of the hands of Satan and his children. But I actually thought, with my first reading report, that he himself then later stated that he was not speaking of anyone specifically. Now that does not seem to be the case. It seems that I misread it. It seems that that might have actually been something that the writer put in, potentially, and that he more or less meant to indirectly throw that at the PNM. And some people might say, well, yes, you know, they're wicked, they're vile, you know, they're only for the 1%, they this, they that, they don't help anybody, blah, 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 blah. Cool. You could criticize someone, and you could be accurate in your criticism, and depending on how bad they are, like I said, the PNM have the Auditor General controversy, the Merit List controversy, the Brent Thomas controversy, the FUL controversy, because it happened under their watch, right? The Paria controversy. AV drilling. At this point, I can't remember it all, okay? But if you say Satan and his children, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, you see that side over there, there's no hope for them. There's no hope for them for us to ever come together with them. They are not just hopeless. We should never even think to try to engage with them. We must at best ignore them. We must at best section them off, not include them in anything, leave them to their own devices, and at worst, they're a problem that needs to be dealt with. That is the meaning of calling anyone Satan. It means that they cannot be reasoned with, they cannot be identified with, they cannot be worked with or compromised with, and I get it. When you say it in those more basic terms, you could argue the TPP had that experience. They couldn't work with the central government. They couldn't work with the PNM, right? Cool. But to say that they are Satan, or to say that anybody is Satan, basically implies that, hey, you will never be able to work with them because they're that bad. Don't even waste your time. Assume that they're evil and treat them as such, the absolute evil. Why is that a problem? Because you might not see that as a problem. You might think, oh, well, I mean, they're wicked and they're vile, and why should we? Hey. And this is the issue I have with people that make certain statements about politics in other countries, particularly America. You think everybody that's worn a balize is the most wicked, evil, vile person in the country? That's fine. Prepare yourself for a divided country, because there's no room to compromise and come together at that point. You leave little room. More importantly, you basically start building a powder keg that's just begging someone to light a match. Because what do you do when you face absolute evil? Do you ignore it? No! Why? Because bad things happen when good men do nothing, right? So someone is going to think, I have to be the good man, the strong man, to make the sacrifice, to deal with the absolute evil as you described it. You didn't prescribe the cure, but we know what the cure is. That's what happens when you vilify your political opponents at that point. You now have no room, even if it's necessary. Just imagine if there was something that required, because you're not going to have a 3/5 majority forever. You can't bank on that. That's the mistake the PNM made, by the way. So what happens now if you end up in a situation where it's 51-49%, right? Can't remember what the math is with regards to the seats. 21-20 or whatever. What if you get into that situation and you have an important piece of legislation to pass? You have no room to even try to make entreaties to the other side, because you have sold your supporters on the fact that they do not deserve anything, that they cannot be reasoned with. So the moment you try to reason with them, you seem like a hypocrite. We have a poor male detection rate in this country. We have way too much guns in this country. And we have various situations that suggest that more trainees are getting more and more comfortable with utilizing violence to sort out their personal differences. You mean to tell me that you don't think violence will not be seen as a tool to solve political differences? All it takes is one. And if one ever happens, we will be tested like we've never been tested before. And maybe we'll rise to that occasion and take the wake-up call for what it is if it ever gets that far. Or maybe we'll crumble under the pressure, because at times we have not been able to deal with higher stake situations. It's just not in our history. We haven't had that hurricane natural disaster hit us directly, ruin our island. We haven't had that level of adversity that some of the other islands and other nations on the world have had to face. The Americans could say they won their independence. We were given our independence. Look at what we've done with it so far. And you might say, well, no, it's the PNM. The PNM, hey, the voters of the country voted them in. So if they were in power for the majority of the time, the voters voted them in. At some point, the buck has to stop at all of us. Is the current government going too far with their political rhetoric? I would say at times, yes, particularly with certain ministers. But this is things that we should have seen coming. They did it when in opposition or when not in power. Meanwhile, has the PNM gone too far with rhetoric sometimes? Yes, not necessarily in the same way. And of course, then there are political activists, and Senator Brown pointed out to the fact that all political operators need to be careful. All because their influence has weight. And it's not about if you could get 100,000 people to agree to some nonsense. It just takes one person dedicated to a cause, a crazy cause, but a cause nevertheless, can upset our society in ways that we have never seen before and we would never imagine to have been able to happen here on TNT soil. Except the doors are wide open for it to happen. That's why there's a state of emergency. That's why I was willing to believe the government with the state of emergency. But what I don't understand is the government that wants to say, and this is the second time that they said there are threats against the government. There are threats against senior government officials. That was the basis of the People's Partnership State of Emergency. That's the basis of this state of emergency right now. At least the first three to 6 months. Maybe not this next series of months. But definitely when they initiated the state of emergency, it was threats against the government, right? And yet, no, we could say all kind of irresponsible things. This is Trinidad and Tobago. It's all talk. It's all talk. An old woman lost her life. Someone went into the house and slit her throat. The investigation's ongoing. There's no information about it. Her brother's distraught. He spoke to her apparently not too long before she was killed. When I see things like that, at some point, it's not robbery gone bad. Even if it is, it speaks to a level of maliciousness and callousness with how we treat human life and human dignity. By the way, this is the report is that it is coming up to the 6th anniversary of her husband's murder. So I don't know what she may or may not have, who she knew, what she may or may not have been involved with, what the feud was, what the situation was. But we're not talking about some young girl who was running with gangs and doing all the wrong things. You're talking about some old lady that got her throat slit. Oh yeah, murders are down. Yeah. I won't be surprised if the perpetrator is not caught. That speaks to why I am sensitive on this issue. Ironically, it's to ensure that these people don't get shot. That's the best part. I find it ironic that the PNM decides to bring it up now. Now, at the end of the day, judge the message not on the basis of the messenger. You might think it's hypocritical of them, but it's still true. So I welcome their inclusion in the conversation and their willingness to speak about it now. But this is one of those lines that we should be very, very, very unwilling to cross. This should be one of those things that the public should have a very critical eye on. But too many people are caught up in the process of cheerleading for their side and vilifying the other side, and they don't realize that when I speak about division now, it's not just about people who, I don't like you because you vote for the other party. I don't like you because you wear the other color. Now it's someone is going to say, y'all are evil, and I must eradicate the evil. And then society will start to break down, because in the face of someone who believes that they are acting with the greater morality that transcends the law, because that's what's going to happen, it's not, things are going to break down if we allow this to continue. Negative politics doesn't necessarily always work. I would argue that the current administration got further on positive politics, everybody wins, than negative politics. But it seems to be within the DNA of certain politicians, of our political environment, and it bothers me. You can't build a country on the basis of only telling people to blame someone else. You actually have to then do the work to build it. Why is it that the focus and energy of too many politicians is on the former and not the latter? All right, I don't have time to get into. There's a whole ongoing drama with the CPO thing. I don't necessarily have time to get into that. We do have a comment to take. We'll take the comment now. And then maybe we'll take a break before we run the phone lines. What's the big thing about Kamala saying to Imbert when Raleigh used to say you want to cuff down somebody on the pavement? Well, here's the thing. Raleigh shouldn't have said that if he said it. One wrong don't make another wrong right. Just because somebody else did it doesn't make it right. Like I said, I was talking, this is why I said up front, I was talking about this long before now. Long before now. We've reached the point where this is not just trading insults. This is saying things that will potentially inspire the wrong behavior from people who do not understand what is rhetorical and what is literal. And the problem is, we're not talking about, oh my gosh, people are going to say more mean things to politicians online. We're talking about the risk of a severe consequence which will then have trickle-down effects, because once you open the door, once one person crosses the line, other people will be more willing to cross that line. And then it will go from politicians getting shot to political workers getting shot, to political activists getting shot, to then anybody that just wears a red balize or a yellow rising sun on the street, in the wrong street, they will get shot. All of a sudden, you see people wanting to put up UNC flyers in PNM constituencies and PNM flyers in UNC constituencies. They'll have to move like special forces in the shadows of the night, in unmarked cars. They'll have to wear balaclavas on their face while they put up these flyers, because it will become similar to a gang turf war. That's the big thing. It seems benign, but the road to hell isn't just paved in good intentions, but it takes a lot of little steps to get there. It takes a lot of little steps to get there. And on some level, there's no political party. There is no political party, to my knowledge, that has not engaged in some sort of extreme rhetoric which adds fuel to the fire. It could be a lot of fuel, it could be a little bit of fuel. But it's not quenching the fire. It's not extinguishing the fire. It is setting up to have a bigger fire. We have Faisal on the line. Good morning, calling on here.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Sean, I want to ask a question. Is Haiti part of CARICOM?
I can't remember. I could look that up now, but I think so.
And so, yes, I also think so. I believe so. I've heard so. But what is passing strange is that when I look at the emphasis that is being placed with respect to Venezuela, and we have all these atrocities taking place in Haiti, I didn't hear other members of CARICOM came out vehemently, to put an end to that. As a matter of fact, the same people that they are trying to tell, do not go into Venezuela, is the same people they are inviting to go into Haiti. It have Kenyan ground forces in Haiti, and we in the Caribbean here, I don't know what we would have done if we would have done anything to alleviate the suffering and the pains that the Haitian people are going through. And so, another thing I would like to mention is that, are we just talking off the cuff, or are we well informed of what the Venezuelan people want? From what I would have seen, you have Venezuelans leaving Venezuela in droves, still as we speak. And so we are not sure whether the Venezuelans want Mr. Maduro. I imagine some would want, because Mugabe had supporters, Idi Amin had supporters. But I wonder if we would take time out to find out what the Venezuelan people really want for themselves, rather than stay out here and make rhetorical comments. Another topic I want to touch on, I've been listening to Mr. Brian Manning for a little bit on the other stations. And with respect to the stand your ground legislation, I heard him crafted a statement which was very, in my opinion, race-baiting, because he was giving some examples of a young man going to pick up his mother from her workplace, dressed up in a sleeveless merino with the hair plait and a big gold chain, you know, and suggesting that he would be a target. But I want to let Mr. Manning know that there are not only uh, criminals of a certain ethnic group. Across the board, there are criminals. So it was disingenuous for him to draw out that example rather than just say people. You follow what I'm saying, Sean?
Mm-hmm.
So I am, you know, he's taking it down a road where he making or wanting to make people believe that a certain ethnic group would be targeted. You know, I'm listening very carefully, and that is dangerous. That is very, very dangerous. And the PNM continues to do that, the race league. They continues to do that. And in my opinion, it is the weakest opposition I would have ever seen in the history of the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. They need to, I mean, come and get cohesive and deal with the issues at hand and stop the blaming. Bring suggestions, bring solutions, my brother. Take care. Have a nice day.
Thank you, caller. Now, with regards to crime and demographics, I'll say this. Historically speaking, there's enough that is known on the record to basically say when it comes to serious major crimes, all races are involved, right? Now, granted, a lot of people think the stereotypical gang member is going to be an Afro-Trinidadian. The stereotypical drug lord is going to be of another race, right? The most powerful race. But then, of course, the last gang leader / drug lord, depending on how you viewed him, who was killed, was of a third race. He was of East Indian descent, right? So I don't think all of a sudden, with the death of that one drug lord, gang leader, what have you, all of a sudden, all East Indians just stop being involved in crime, like all East Indian criminals, right? So whatever the demographics are, it's probably not just because of the racial reasons and racial cultural reasons why whatever the demographics of crime are that they are. There's a whole host of other things, socioeconomic, geographical, with regards to physical location, etc., right? I don't like anybody bringing up race and crime as any kind of reasoning, to be honest. Both sides have done it. I dislike it because it reduces the arguments to race talk. And the population seems to be more than willing to engage on some level the race talk. So I can't say that either side has the moral high ground on that issue. But I will say that anybody that brings it up in just about any manner, no matter how well-intentioned it is or is not, right? And I say that because you're going to say, no, Brian Manning had no good intentions. I say that because UNC people have brought up race talk, and you might view that as well-intentioned, and I'm saying even that is things that should just not be tolerated. We shouldn't go there at all. We should not go there at all. Because right now, the racial division and the political division is growing. With regards to getting solutions, you're correct. That is a problem from the whole political system, not just the PNM though. We have Digger Martin in line. Caller, good morning, you're on here.
All your listeners, stand your ground legislation. I think the PNM opposition would be advised, because they have already said most of them have guns. And I think it's better that...
Who said that though?
Well, the AG was saying on the front bench, he was pointing out to them...
And he said it in Parliament where he has protection, right?
But Gary Griffith also said some of them have 1, 2, 5, 10, and 13.
Well, here's the thing. He's speaking about the members of the PNM in the last administration. The current opposition bench is not the exact same people. That's point number one.
Yes, but...
Fitzgerald Hines is not there. And that was one of the names Gary dropped with regards to trying to get favors for FULs.
Right, but what I'm saying, the credibility is for them to give it up and argue the case.
No, my point is that is not enough to prove the assertion that the current, it could be a minority or it could be none at all, that the current members of the PNM all have multiple FULs, or most of them have multiple FULs, right? It's not enough, unfortunately, because the personnel changed. So you can't just say, well, before back then in 21, this was the case. The personnel did change.
So what you are saying, the credibility of the AG might be compromised? Because he said, I'm coming for you, right? Earlier in the play, and now we had identified that a number of them have FUL. What I'm saying is their argument is that, hey, a lot of killings could take place. The fact that they have it, they are putting themselves into that scenario and are going to go back to the little two kids who were on the Komodo camp being trained to use FUL. What was the intent then? And why were they? We still haven't gotten an answer if they got a temporary approval FUL to use those things. But that, besides what I really called for, and I'm coming again, there was two judgments yesterday on the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
One is that the SOE in 2024, the 30th of December, when Christopher Rowley was in a party and he said, call the SOE, 6 people was charged and it was dismissed yesterday because the police, the detectives said the police failed to file or give him information for it to continue. So that shows a big gap in the police competency. Now, there was another judgment, one of the promotional boards, where they say it is null and void and all those promotions. So my continued assessment of the police, it needs to be reconstructed. And the Minister of Defense said we need better policemen. If we want to sustain what is currently happening, the whole of the police internal organization structure, particularly human resource, has to be looked at seriously, and it has to be reconstructed. I've always said we have continued from the day of policing with the hierarchy and promotion and things like that, and we have seen a lot of the promotion has been flawed. We have to ask ourselves why they continue to use that protocol, which has been embedded in the police service since Thy Kingdom Come. We have to make a decision, a hard decision, to move forward with the personnel. I mean to say, this is the 3rd SOE or the 4th SOE. And if you have, remember the 2011, they say a lot was charged and dismissed. The police has not learned from that. And we have to stand strong legislation. I'm hoping that the police senior leadership understand they have to know the legislation inside out, and that requires a particular intelligence of the police officers to understand it. Not only read and comprehend what it is required, do a checklist so when they charge somebody, they have ticked off all the boxes. This requires a level of competency, and it goes back to recruitment. It goes back to one of the recommendations the Saran report said. Yes, you could take in low-level people, you could take in people with a number of levels, but the middle management, you have to look for people with the competency and the certification who could add value, not take away value from the police service. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Sounds scholar. Here's the thing with the SOE tensions, right? When it leads to lawsuits, failed prosecutions, or aborted prosecutions and the like, for high-profile situations and with significant accusations, since 2011, people will start to speculate about political interference in that, which is not totally the police's fault, right? So I can't put all of that on the TTPS, right? Except on some level, they're not supposed to be taking political instruction. So the thing that could give them some cover also could then damn them in another way if we accept that to be the truth. I have more to say, but we have moved on the line, so I'll say it after. I'll also have the Venezuelan talk from Diego Martin to also respond to. But Mova, good morning.
Let's take away my service. I don't have an iPhone.
You need to mute your TV, caller.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
I would like you to explain. You were speaking earlier about Naparima wanting to take the government to court. Did I hear you right?
Yes, that's what was reported. I am just reading the report and yeah.
Okay. Now, I want you to repeat what you said. You said that, in your opinion, if they were to take the government to court and win, that would throw everything out the window?
Not just if they win, not just if they win. It also depends on the court of public opinion to some extent simultaneously. When you have the narrative now presented that, a school's fundraising event is being affected, some people are going to just see that and run with it. That's just the unfortunate reality that I don't like, but I have to acknowledge. When they see that, they're going to then have a negative reaction to the other side of what they perceive to be the other side of the issue, and will prioritize, but the school need to make the money so that they could operate.
Sean. You keep underestimating the whole spectrum of this noise pollution issue. You keep doing that.
Time out. This has nothing to do with the rest of the noise pollution issue. If the public was sensitive to the totality of the noise pollution issue, it wouldn't have been an issue to begin with. So I'm not underestimating. I am pointing to the fact that there will be sections of the population who don't care, who are willfully ignorant. It doesn't bother them, so they're not going to put effort into it. But they're going to see a thing that's going to be easy for them to believe, that's going to engender an emotional response from them, and they will run with it. I'm not saying it's the most responsible response. I'm just saying that's Sean, probably what it will be.
You keep saying a section of the population will run with it, and then you're going on to say about the court. So if a section of the population running with something, you're making that sound as if that is going to influence what the court might decide on the matter if it gets to court.
No. I said if two things happened,
right,
the implication is one of them could happen alone. They are not interconnected. But if they both happen, the accumulation of the two things could lead to this result. The other thing is, depending on how, and I went into detail, the argument that the Fed promoters take, the law upon which the basis they're asking for relief, and the arguments they make specifically on how abrupt the decision is and the losses they incur. That's what I said about the court decision. The court of public opinion is a separate thing, but if both of those things happen, then it's easy to see the politicians pulling up on this issue. I'm very certain that's what I said, and I put more time than I wanted to give it in order to spell out both of those things. So please don't come now and say I lumped them together and that the court of public opinion is going to sway the court. I never said that.
No. Sean, wait, hold on, Sean. I didn't say you said that. I said you made it sound as if one is going to influence the other. I didn't say that you understand me clearly.
Okay, all right.
But let me tell you this. In my opinion, Sean, based on someone who has been fighting this for years, and based on someone who knows that right now what is happening, dialogue is taking place, okay? I'm going to tell you this. What Prime Minister did by making the announcement, she has given us, who have been fighting this power that we didn't have before because we were being ignored. And I will also tell you this. Whoever wants to take this matter to court, I want them to take it to court, because there are a lot of issues about this noise pollution aspect that some people don't know. And the more people that are educated to the effects of noise, it's not going to be swept away, Sean. Believe you me, it is not going to be swept away. So all who want to go to court, let Naparima go to court. Let the Fed promoters go to court. Let's see where it takes us. That is my position, because we would not lose this fight. This fight is for our rights. This fight is for our peace of mind. You understand? Despite our situation was being ignored by the other party for years. They didn't care. And when that gentleman made that statement, love music can now be played. Most of these people who are speaking now and attacking the Prime Minister now had nothing to say then. There's a kind of imbalance in this country that is very unhealthy. Very, very unhealthy. But notwithstanding, I hear you, and I'll tell you this. We will not lose that fight. Regardless of what happens, who goes to court, fight promoters, whatever, we will not do this fight. This fight is for the average citizen. Some of the average citizens in Trinidad and Tobago to even understand the rights they have. Every time, every discussion that is raised about this noise issue is going to strengthen our position. You mark my words. Have a good day.
I'm sorry, I don't think they meant to cut you off, but when you said have a good day, we have another caller waiting. I'll just say this. We're not technically debating it along the same axes. I don't think it's guaranteed that any court matter you're going to win. And also, depending on the nature of the arguments presented, I don't even know if the wider issues of noise pollution will come out if the FET promoters take the government to court on this issue, because this issue will be with regards to the abrupt decision. Most likely that'll be the focus. Not about the wider question of noise pollution, which can have merits, but rather the fact that so far the proposed solution, the proposed cure is disproportionate because it was done without warning and it was done abruptly, right? And I get it. It doesn't matter to you. I don't think the court is not going to take that into consideration. It all depends again on, because people who were in the right that took the government to court over being locked out of the country, their lawsuits failed, and from what I was told, it failed because of the arguments they made, the angle that they took. Not because they didn't have moral justification to say, why are we locked out of a country that can't even, that allows illegal immigration on a daily basis. We have Shogunas on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Well, Sean, people keep on saying that it's so difficult to fire public servants. And I've always maintained that is not true. The easiest person to fire is a public servant if you follow the rules and if you do things that justify his firing. And certain people do not know that under the public service regulations, you cannot give somebody an adverse report by surprise, except for some criminal thing they did. You're supposed to bring it to their attention and give them the opportunity to remedy the situation. In most of the cases that I have seen where they were not taken on, the politicians just wanted to move people because they didn't want to do what they want. That is what I have to say, except if you found out anything about this, and I found I've mentioned before, but I didn't get time.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, at this point, generally speaking, some of the issues are universal globally, and I don't know if there's enough to say that what is going on in other parts of the world is not a significant factor here, because your arguments usually, I believe, is saying no, there are specific things that have nothing to do with the usual arguments of demographics and aging population, of the specific things about mismanagement here with our local situation.
No, I named specific things they did to sabotage Chatham.
Right, and I understand that.
Did that happen?
I'm not disputing the fact, so I will assume that they have.
If that happened, it must destroy the thing, because I told you the ILO warned them that would happen.
No, but my point is, there is also a situation where we've seen with higher life expectancy from America, Japan, China. I understand. The problem is, I understand what you're saying, but for us to say definitively that's the only cause, we have to be able to determine that the other factors are not at play.
No. I am saying other factors there.
Right.
This one alone would have destroyed it.
Okay.
Because by putting a minimum, by the politicians stipulated a minimum, they have no power to do that. That is number one. And that is what caused the problem. It is the actuarial review that's supposed to indicate what sort of ballpark figure the minimum should be. Instead, they put a minimum, the politicians put a minimum that destroyed the whole concept of actuarial review. Because in the end, you could have only pay everybody the minimum, where you had about 6 or 7 categories before. That is the point I get in.
Yeah.
Not that other people know it. I don't do this. I don't do it specifically. But what we did, we had a perfect system here, and it was working very good until one politician decided to interfere with it. And when he didn't finish off the job, the next fella come and takes kill it.
So, if I'm getting you correctly, here's the thing. I think even if that didn't happen in the past, potentially something like that could have happened now as cost of living increased. That's a very...
No, because you have the actuarial review will take that into consideration.
Right.
That is the whole purpose of actuarial review.
Yes, but the actuarial review, their findings are on the basis of the financial position of the fund or cost of living for the society and what is...
The fund.
Right, and what I'm saying is at some point with regards to inflation in the last couple of years, the politician, any politician will make the political decision, the payouts have to increase. At some point.
No. The law don't give them that power. The law gives them the power.
Listen, it's not about...
Even the actuarial review.
I'm not saying that they're right to do it or that they have the authority to do it.
Right or wrong.
I am saying that regardless, that's a decision that any politician will attempt to make.
So, we have, as I said, I have crooks over here. That has nothing to do with it. If you have crooked governments and crooked people making crooked decisions, that is the natural...
The problem is some people are going to view it as the correct decision. That's why it was allowed to happen in the first place.
There will always have to be somebody who will consider some stupidity behind it. I am talking about what is the law and what is proper principle.
Caller, I have to end it here because we have another caller waiting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I get what you're saying. But unfortunately, that is just dripping with politics. We have Faisal back. Good morning.
John, morning. I wanted to ask a question. Tell me something. I'm listening to the cries of the promoter, which I sympathize with, or whom I sympathize with. Was there any formal contract with these venues, or was it just an expectation that they would have it for these events?
So here's the thing. I'm not sure exactly, because from what I've been told, the compensation to the venues is actually not that much, right? That's one of the allures of these national spaces. The problem is, regardless of, once you have some sort of consideration and some sort of agreement and some sort of expectation, which is reasonable, that will then cause the promoters to invest in the event, the court might view that as basically saying, yes, there was, for all intents and purposes, a non-verbal, a verbal contract if they don't have a written one.
All right, so I just want to throw another thing on the mix. So on one hand, you have the promoters. On the other hand, you have the citizenry, the disgruntled citizenry, to some extent, and it's a taxpayer-funded facility or facilities. So I think that has to be taken into consideration. And these promoters are private promoters. If are we now to say that coincidentally, that there was going to be a coaching clinic, be it cricket or football, during that period of time, then what would happen?
Well,
are you there with me, Sean?
I get you, but I would suspect, depending on the situation, the FETs would take precedent, not because they're FETs, but because if they got there first. If the cricket people got there first, then the FET people would have scheduled around whatever is pre-existing there. The other thing is, I don't know how much...
Sean, in the absence of a contract, anything can happen.
Yes,
especially with taxpayers' money is concerned. against the private citizen. Yes? And just by the name of the Brian Lara Cricket Academy, which would suggest that events of that nature will take precedence over everything
Caller,
else,
I think you are...
especially with a private citizen.
Caller, I think you are over-indexing on the fact that it's a public facility.
No, I have to.
No. Yeah, but the thing is, on the basis of the agreements that may have been in place, which I believe there was some form of agreement in place, the fact that it's a public venue doesn't really come into play there with regards to if there's a capacity for a lawsuit or not.
Sean, I've never heard one of these promoters or seen any one of these promoters produce or attempt to suggest there was any contractual arrangement.
Right, but what did I say? What did I say? Because this is a thing in business law in our country. If you have had for multiple years successfully engaged with this venue to have events, you have gone through the same procedures, you invested the same money because you have a reasonable expectation. There is some amount of verbal agreement. There's some amount of verbal agreement and documentation, regardless of if there's a contract or not. That does not mean that the government can't be liable. I'm not saying that it is.
But I am saying this. And the magic word there is expectation. The magic word is expectation.
Right, but the fact that it's a public facility doesn't really have that much relevance on that concept or issue in the law.
I beg to disagree with you. I beg to humbly disagree with you. I think the taxpayers would hold a major decision in the court-making process when this goes to court, if it goes to court.
So
I am certain that will weigh very heavily.
That's a separate issue.
Judgment.
The fact that it's a taxpayer facility is pertinent if you want to make the case that the feds are not contributing enough to the public facility so that it is a cost to the public. However, I don't know if that argument would be entertained because noise pollution is the debated issue, and it will be the claimants, the plaintiffs, they will be the one that's presenting the argument. The defendants are not, I don't believe, could do a counter argument to that extent. And look, I could be wrong though.
No, it's not only noise pollution is the factor, but I also heard in the mix the destruction of the state facility to some extent. I heard that in the mix. I heard I think, I can't quote the fellow name, but he's a member of the government who manages the facility, I think, who would have said that. Now, what I want to say to you is that the judge in his wisdom, the government is the custodian of these facilities. The government is the custodian, and I think it will weigh very heavily that the taxpayer and the consideration of the taxpayer in defense of the government saying, look, I am protecting the taxpayer and their dollar. That will be very heavily on judgment, I suspect.
Yes, but again, I don't even know if that, because just because it's out there in the public doesn't mean that that's part of the official reason initially. That's point number one. Point number two, right? Part of it is not with regards to is the whole situation of whether or not having FET stay is going to be debated. If the case, hold on, because I have to wrap this up, we have a caller waiting. If the case is the abruptness, a lot of what you said there might not be as relevant as you think, because it's not about the merit of if they should be there or not, but the abruptness by which the decision was made without the ability to not incur losses.
I am thinking they would have gotten over 3 months' notice. Is that correct?
That might not be enough notice, caller. That might not be enough notice. Exactly. Thank you, caller. I have to end it there because San Fernando's been waiting for about the last 5 minutes. San Fernando, good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
I'm going to jump into what you was talking, what you just spoke about there before I make my other contribution. Let me say this. Taxpayers There is nothing. There's nothing called a taxpayer facility. Eh? Nothing in Trinidad and Tobago. It is a national facility, and I dare say, Fed promoters are also taxpayers. People going to the Feds are also taxpayers. So there is, and because in Trinidad and Tobago, there has already been precedent set for a lot of sporting facilities that are basically dual facilities because they have been afforded, they have been used to have events other than sporting events. That there is enough precedent there for have reasonable expectations by these Fed promoters. That is a fact. And I would just like to see, instead of all the talk, I want to see these things go to the courts and let the chips fall where they may, because they now because as I said before, now we are having a clash with culture and noise pollution. That is basically it there now. And in the middle of this is sporting facilities. And what are they supposed to be used for? And it can't be left to the whim of a politician to decide this not going to be used for this anymore, when there has already been precedent. So the courts is the best option as far as I'm concerned right now. Now, that being said, I want to go back to the issue of Mr. Manning talking about that Mr. Feiselberg talked about Mr. Manning and his machinations, and he described a person in a vest and gold chain and whatever going to pick up his mother. Let me say this: in Trinidad and Tobago, and let me say in Trinidad, the one thing that you could almost say we have almost racial equity among the two major races in Trinidad and Tobago is crime. Is crime and criminal activity. Criminal activity and crime have, if you want to look at racial harmony, that is what it is in criminal activity. So that issue with trying to with this stand your ground thing and talking about one set of people might end up is bandit that going to feed the, if it is that people trying to do wrong to people who in their homes that are going to get killed. If it is that this is the issue. So I don't know why it is that they're stretching out this issue about who are going to be at risk. And in previous time when Dr. Roy talked about if somebody climbing a fence to pick some zabuka, all that kind of ridiculousness. This is about, although as I said, this is stand your ground with guns, I am still waiting to see, because I am not seeing anything much different in that. I find that stand your ground legislation, if you read it, it is another example of lazy law, what I describe as lazy law. For instance, there's one issue inside there where they talk about Bmobile gang, and there is nothing in the preamble that tells you what a gang is in with respect to the bill.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there, and I would have thought. So then you have to go back to the anti-gang legislation to because that particular bill, the standing ground bill, does not say what is a gang. And as far as I'm concerned, anytime anybody trying to come into your place and is more than one, they should be considered a gang. As far as I'm concerned. Now, so as I'm saying, we in Trinidad and Tobago have to understand that this is a lawless country, and to do things, you have to do things to deal with this lawlessness, and everybody would not win in this situation. Everybody can't win. Somebody, you have to give up. You have to give into something. The last point is this other talk about certain people have where the opposition, the government saying that too much people get guns, have guns on the opposition side. That's another stupid point. I want to say this. If anybody want to know the truth, let them lift the veil of the Stanley John report, and they will understand. Let them lift the veil of the Stanley John report, and they would understand the amount of firearms that was a few years were given out, and who they went to.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody want to hear that, you know. Nobody don't want to read that, you know. Nobody want to read it, but lift the veil of the Stanley John report, and I dare say they will see, or just get the police commissioner to give a report without names as to the demographics of who have firearms in the car, firearm users license in the country, and all this stupidness this is all going to stop.
The geographic demographics, because that can reveal a lot.
That's right.
Particularly the socio-economics of the situation.
So, what people don't want, people only talking. People don't really want to hear the truth, you know, or see the truth, you know. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. We know the commissioner is going to do that. Law enforcement is not any practice of transparency on that level. Okay. I do believe that in other jurisdictions, they define what a gang is. I remember listening to an undercover police officer describe how they identify gang members, and they would have a list, depending on the gang, of different identifiers, and they needed to have at least, like, I think it was something like 3, and any individual would have to have at least 3 of the identifiers. Now, in foreign gangs, they are dripping with symbolism that is very specific to these gangs, to the point where if you are not a member of the gang and you have a certain tattoo that's identified with the gang, or you wear certain colors that's identified with the gang, you could get in real trouble with that gang and lose your life. Which is why, at least in that case, it might be more practical and it might be easier to say, well, if they have this tattoo, if they wear these colors, basically, there's a certain gang that wears green Chicago Bulls gear, merchandise. The Chicago Bulls have never worn a green uniform as far as I know. But that gang that buys a lot of that merch, one of their colors is green. Or their color is green, right? So, and no one is going to encroach on that. And I'm certain that those jurisdictions will have in the law what is a criminal gang, what activities do they do, and how do you identify them to constitute that they are a gang. A crew, a robbery crew, is different from a gang. And you can have someone who could probably be charged as both, if you have laws for both, because I believe you should have laws for both. Because a robbery crew is not necessarily a gang, and a gang is not necessarily a robbery crew, and they should have laws for both, right? And the robbery crew stuff could be home invasion or larceny or whatever, right? But I do think, I don't like it when I understand to you that's a gang, but the law needs specifics. And a gang and anti-gang legislation really should not be using blanket umbrellas to deal with other situations that the individuals involved with are not always automatically involved in street gang activities as well, right? It's not automatic. So I would prefer the distinction to be more accurate. Now, yeah, we're not professional in writing laws. I'm just going to say that. It is what it is. Show me a good law that we have passed, that we have written and passed within the last 20 years. I don't know of any. I could be wrong. I just don't know of any. Because there always seems to be some problem with the laws that are enacted in this country. Always. Always. Right? Now, with regards to the court deciding the matter on FETs at these public venues, I actually am not too sure about that. Regardless of who wins, it could be the government who wins, it could be FET promoters who wins. What I think is going to happen is the scope of the ruling, it's going to be debated on a limited aspect of the wider situation. So we're going to get a ruling on a technicality. We're not going to really get a resolution to the larger scale, wider scope questions. So I am not so, if the court, now maybe it would lead to a wider lawsuit, or the lawsuit, the ruling could lead to a wider lawsuit, or the lawsuit might be more expansive. But I suspect the FET promoters ain't going to risk it. I suspect they're just going to go with the fact that, hey, this is abrupt, and we need relief for this year. And it will leave the door open for banning them next year. And what I said up front was, well, maybe not up front, but earlier on was, they should have banned them because we were so close to the carnival season. Carnival is in February, I believe, right? And they, not all the fets will be in February. Some of the fets will be in January. Some of the fets will be in December or maybe even November, right? Whatever. They should have banned it because it was so close to carnival. Upcoming, they should have banned it for the year following. That would be more difficult to say, oh, this is unfair. We didn't have a chance. The losses we incurred. No, 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 no. You do it up front. No excuses anymore. But because they did it abruptly, now the door is open where they may have legal recourse that could then further support their case to maintain the right to have fets at these venues, right? And basically what I'm getting is, we believe we're right, so this should not happen. And I'm like, time out. Don't look at it that way of what you think should happen. Look at it with what can happen based on what has been happening. Why is the system going to change just because the Prime Minister said she wants to change it? Now, I don't actually remember her promising the 10%. Felicia Thomas, the president of the PSA, was the one that mentioned it first as far as I remember. But look how that rollout's been going. It's been the opposite of smooth sailings. It almost seems like at every turn the president of the PSA is complaining about something other with the case. Hey, why we can't start the negotiations? Hey, we don't want to hear about the economic reality of the country. We don't need to hear that. When are we going to get the back pay? Like, she's back in the press about something or the other that she's complaining about. And she might end up getting everything that she wants. But I'm like, time out. Do you not see that what should be a straightforward thing? We promised this thing. Not only did we promise this thing, but we said we were going to deliver this specific campaign promise, and they voted us in anyway. We have the mandate to deliver it regardless of who dislikes it. I had all said up front, I didn't like it, but I understand they have a mandate for it. We knew what was happening. The country voted them in. It is what it is. People can't complain in hindsight. I can complain because that's my job. But generally speaking, the population can't just say, whoa, whoa, what do you mean? I didn't intend for this to happen when I voted for you. No, we knew this. We knew this up front. They gave it to us up front. But it just, for whatever reason, you have that mandate, right? And it's been the opposite of smooth. I cannot assume that this noise pollution thing is also going to be smooth sailing, because I get it, consultations, blah, 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 blah. You know what is the real low-hanging fruit with noise pollution? Get the EMA to do their job. That is the easiest low-hanging fruit. Easiest, most simple. Why can't you do your job? You tell us why. Right? Forget the consultations with the public. Just go to the EMA and say, why are you not doing your job? What's the issue? Let's fix it now. We could start fixing so many things before we even need public consultation. What, TTPS, what's the problem? Right? Unless it's legislative, which in that case might take longer. But if there's things that could be fixed now for now, like maybe they did go to the EMA. I don't know. It would have behooved them to tell us. But in my mind, the EMA doing their job on this issue is far more wide-reaching than carnival fets. But I haven't heard anything of that. Maybe I'm wrong. They're saying consultations happen. I don't think consultations are needed to do that. Right? Politicians tend to not be proficient at following proper procedure. This is back to the first thing that the Professor Shagona said with firing public servants, and he pointed out as to why. But just look at the whole CPAP situation. Couldn't even do that properly. Had to come the day after and say, oh, well, yeah, we have severance fair. So the thing is, like I said, the court proceeding on noise pollution, back to that, it might not go further into the wider situation, and it might leave it incomplete. But then depending on who wins, they might get momentum in order to further their case in the wider situation. And whatever is the right thing, the law doesn't care about what you believe to be the right thing, what you think is the right thing, the law doesn't care for if you think your rights have been infringed upon. It needs to be proven in a court of law, and that is more complicated. That is more complicated, right? It is an international practice, that is to say in other countries. You have sporting facilities that were paid for with taxpayers' money, that are operated by private entities, but paid for with taxpayers' money, that are used for venues for large-scale events. This is not something where we could say, oh, this only happens in Trinidad. Or this is not something that is not done. This is something that is done. It has been done around the world, and it has been done here. And just because now you're like, oh, well, it shouldn't happen, unfortunately, that in the eyes of the law might not be a reasonable argument, at the very least, for this upcoming carnival. That's what I was trying to say all the time. The law has other considerations to take. Noise pollution is not the only thing they're going to look at, and anything the Fed promoters say is going to just be, you know, excuses. No, they're not going to view it that way. Maybe they will, maybe they will, but in which case I will be surprised if they don't be more comprehensive on the issue. And I very much suspect the easiest thing would be to lift the ban for this year and basically tell the government, you can ban them next year. I suspect that's going to be the easiest thing to do. Some judges appear to be more willing to go the route of least resistance. I could be wrong, though. I could be wrong. Now, I take what politicians say at face value most of the time. Here's the problem with what the AG said about the PNM having firearms. The PNM then said, as a retort, that's not true. So now what do? Because I'm taking what both sides say at face value, without evidence, it would be biased to say I believe one over the other. Because neither claim is technically unreasonable. The thing is, the AG, if he is speaking from a position of knowledge, could potentially give us receipts. I don't know to what extent privacy laws come into play there. But if privacy laws do come into play there, to what extent is his statements in Parliament towing the line too close? The thing is, a lot of what Guy Griffith said was not about politicians having firearms. A lot of it was also who they wanted to get firearms for. But like I said, the current crop of politicians are different. It's not the same lineup. So when you speak about the group generally, if the majority of the perpetrators are gone, or enough of them are gone, can you still make the same general statement towards the new totality of the group, with the new senators and new MPs and so on and so on? Does Kareem Marcel have a gun? Do the new senators have a gun? The new senator from Tobago, does she have a gun? What about Mr. Devines? Maybe he has a gun, maybe he doesn't, I don't know, right? We don't have evidence to back up that claim. So once the other side counters it and says that's not true, now I'm left waiting to who can provide me evidence to say they are the ones that are more accurate or correct or right than the other. Now, the last thing is this. I have seen commentary from Venezuelans who do not agree in principle of America going into Venezuela. What they said basically was they want Maduro gone to the extent that they're willing to accept the American intervention. That's anecdotal. Make of that what you will. That was one individual. Yesenia Gonzalez is another individual that is basically, she's saying her priority is removing Maduro. Right? You will get Venezuelans who don't want Maduro gone. The question is, to what extent are those the Venezuelans who benefit from the regime? To what extent was the election legitimate or illegitimate? And we're having a political debate on that affects other people's lives, because I think the issue that I have with a lot of people that disagree with American intervention is not wrong on the principle that American intervention is risky. I get that. But the tone and tenor of their language, similar to the fact that the tone of the Prime Minister's language is distorting the content of what she actually says to make you think she's more gung-ho about regime change than she actually is, because she's actually saying she does not support it. The tone and tenor of all the academics and all the other heads of state in CARICOM and all the other stakeholders who speak about zone of peace is that we don't care if the Venezuelan people are suffering. We're going to make the case they're not, because that's more convenient for our agenda. That's the issue I have with it. No one could give me significant evidence to say everything is fine with the Venezuelan democracy. It's all the sanctions that's at fault. No one can give me an argument to that. They don't even debate that issue. Notice how they stay clear away from that. They stay clear away from it. They don't want to touch it. And that's my issue. My issue is, for the convenience of regional politics, too many people are willing to leave the Venezuelans out to dry. And you could say that the Americans are basically using the Venezuelan strife as an excuse. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that there isn't some suffering that needs relief. And to say, somebody said, some brilliant person said, let them deal with it on their own. I don't think there's, listen, Myanmar went from a military dictatorship to democracy. And it took all of 2 seconds for the military leaders to decide, now we're going back to a military dictatorship. You do not internally deal with dictators who control the military. You do not. It is not a thing. It is just not. That's like saying the employees could rise up against the owner of a private business, a sole owner. No, that's not going to happen. They could quit. And that's what the Venezuelan people are doing. At least those who can, they leave. All right, over time. So, thanks to the callers. Thanks for the engaging conversation. I am not wanting this noise pollution thing to end up in a negative resolution. I am pointing out why I think it can end up in a negative resolution, and I am cautioning against it, and I hope it doesn't happen, because I do think it's letting the EMA and the FET promoters and all the sound people and the TTPS, it lets all of them off the hook if this goes nowhere, which I think it can happen, because you have to get the culture to change, not just the people who are affected by noise pollution. It is what it is. Thanks to, I hope I don't have any comments that I forgot. Since we're over time anyway. Right, no. Like I said, thanks to you guys, thanks to the comments. This is Talking About a WSND Connect Capital, reminding you to have a good day, stay safe, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other, which is why the noise pollution thing is a problem, to be honest. It's nice to be nice. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good day and welcome to this new episode of Strictly Legal on WESN.